Hi, good morning everyone. Before we begin today, I want to invite you to think of one thing. I want to invite you to think of one thing that you've tried to do for yourself in the past 6 to 12 months that's eluded you and you haven't quite succeeded to make that change for yourself. Keep that in mind as we go along, because this would give you a good frame of reference for what we're about to talk, and I'll tell you a little bit more in a moment. Now, when GibTalks announced that they're looking for speakers, I jumped in it 2 feet because I'm a change catalyst. And for the past 17 plus years, I've been deeply intrigued by what moves us to change for the positive, and then taking that information and using it with the people that I work with to inspire them to create those changes in their own life and to keep them for the long term. So I've got notes for that. And in my experience, the 2 overriding main reasons why we fail to change when we fail. And it's not what you might think. Basically, it's not lack of information. Definitely with the internet we have that. It's not lack of motivation, and it's not lack of willpower, as you might think. What tends to happen, and this might be familiar to some of you, is that we hear some exciting bit of information on the TV, or maybe at a talk like this, hopefully. We rush off home, so definitely not lack of motivation. We rush off home, we buy the latest book on a diet that we're supposed to follow, or we buy the superfood that's going to solve all of our problems, and then we start implementing. And then for the next maybe 2 to 3 months, everything runs really well. We get good results, we get inspired, because we're all wired to want to do good for ourselves, so we naturally follow that. And then before too soon, we stumble, we fall, because that's the natural process of change. We dust ourselves off because we are taught that strong individuals dust themselves off and carry on going. And then we stumble, we fall again, and then we stumble and we fall again. And before we know it, there's a little voice in the back of our head that starts whispering at us, oh, maybe we're just not strong enough. Maybe our willpower is not going to carry us through this one. And maybe we should just give up. And then eventually we start listening to that voice, because we're also wired to want to go back to safety, to what we used to have before, as opposed to this new change. And pretty soon we actually just give up. And what's a crying shame is that some of us resolve to never try again. And in my experience, the 2 overriding reasons why we fail to create the changes that we want in our lives is, number 1, because we try to change everything at the same time. And at the same time, we must look after our kids, we must look after the family, cook dinner, go and make money, etc. And naturally that becomes overwhelming, so we give up. And then the second overriding reason why we might fail is because we try to change our lifestyle on somebody else's terms. So we play to someone else's tune. We expect that somebody outside of us is going to know better than us, and we live in our bodies 24/7. So we forget to take charge of that. We keep charge of our businesses, but we forget to take charge of our own bodies and listening to them and paying attention to what will change us for the better. So today I'm here to give you a way to change any failed attempts in the past. I'm going to share with you a simple method called tiny little actions, which will allow you to become the boss of your own change process, or as I like to call it, the CEO of the business of you. It sounds a lot more sexy like that. Okay, the tiny little actions method is based on tried and tested frameworks you might have heard in all walks of life. Like, for example, in business, we call it Kaizen, so it's small incremental changes amounting to massive overriding long-term results. And then in the realm of storytelling, we've heard of the parable of the tortoise and the hare. The slow and steady wins the race. Someone you might not have heard of before is Professor B.J. Fogg of Stanford University, who has dedicated his life in simplifying the process of change to make it easier for us so we can do it quickly and reliably, time and time again. But before I tell you about the tiny little actions method, I'd like you to do a little experiment with me, please, while we're sitting down, because we don't have time to get up. With your left hand, I'd like you to point at me the way you... Come on. I can see that much from the light. Point at me with your left index finger, the way your mom taught you it was rude to do so. And then with the right hand, give me a thumbs up so I'm okay about that finger. Okay, cool? And now, as quickly as possible, I'd like you to switch between the 2 of them. Try it. Just try it. Good. Okay, so if you anything like a normal human being and you've never tried this before, this would have felt really awkward, right? And one of three overriding thoughts would have creeped up in your mind. One of them might have been, this is stupid and it's too hard, and you would have given up. Number two might have been, wow, this is hard, but I know that if I keep practicing, I'm going to get better at it, just like I did when I learned to ride a bike or to drive a car, etc. And then the third thought might have been, wow, this is really cool. If I get good at this, can you imagine the party trick I'm going to have for Friday night, right? And neither one of the three is right or wrong. What they are is showing you how you typically deal with change when you meet change. And I wanted to give you this little physical example as an anchoring point, so the next time you're faced with change and you feel that pushback, you have something physical to recall. Remember that your brain is wired to learn new things, and as long as you put in the practice and you make the practice challenging enough to keep you interested, so keep practicing, or and you don't make the challenge too challenging so it's overwhelming, your brain will get better at it if you show up and you put in the practice. So also I would like to keep this little physical exercise as we go along, and I share the process with you, because some of the concepts I'm going to share with you will give you that resistance and you will want to reject them because it's something new. But please trust the process. It's been tried and tested on many, many people before, and they have been successful. So I'm going to invite you to come along. The reason why you have the sheets that you have with you is because I have to rattle through the process really quickly, because we're only given 10 minutes and I'm still going to overrun probably by one. Don't worry if you don't get some of the details. Everything you need is on that sheet. Just dedicate on writing that one action that you thought of in the beginning of the conversation. Write it down somewhere before you leave today and commit on going through the sheet. It will take you 5 to 10 minutes maybe in your spare time. Commit some time this weekend to go through that with the sheet in your own time. Right. The tiny little actions process has 5 steps. The power of it lies in the fact that it's a process, so you learn it once and then you apply it as many times as you want. So you don't have to keep on relearning new things. And because it's a process, it becomes a tool in your toolbox. And the tool you can use repeatedly to basically create as many changes as you want. It has 5 steps, as I already said. And basically the first step we've already taken care of, which is the action that you want to implement, the change that you want to make happen in your life. The sheet will actually have a way for you to make it tiny and specific. Step number 2 is to think of a trigger, and the trigger basically serves you as a reminder, because the action you're going to do is something new for you. The trigger will remind you to perform that action so that you can put in the practice and get better. And the trigger is typically something that you already do as a habit in your life, like brushing your teeth. Again, in the sheet you will find more details as to how to choose the right trigger for your action that you decided to create. Step 3 is a step that typically the type A individuals that I work with would poo-poo as a little bit of a childish and silly step, but psychologically it's one of the most important steps. And step 3 is the reward and celebration, because our brains are also wired to want to do things that make us feel good or give us some sort of reward. Right, so this is basically an artificial way to trick your brain, give it something meaningful and significant, so that it wants to come back and do that practice that you need to do to actually make this new activity the norm. Right. Step 4 is a very almost technical step that I felt that was needed to be put in here, because our lifestyles are so busy nowadays. We need a little bit of a fail-safe so that we don't forget to do our action every day. So schedule it. I usually use my watch, but you could schedule it on your phone. If you use a diary, whatever you use already, use that to schedule a reminder for yourself. And then the final step is to do, which is the practice we spoke about. So to do your action, and then to also to track it. And this typically gets the most eye rolls from people that I work with, because they go like, well, really, Anita, do I need another thing to do? I mean, it's already enough. But I'd like you to think of the tracking as a really powerful motivation tool, and also as a very reliable and loyal accountability buddy for you. So basically what you'll do is you could just take something as plain sheet of paper, stick it next to your desk. You just have a line for each day of the month, and you just come and you tick it off. But if you can imagine that if you had a 10-day streak of showing up and doing your action, it's much less likely for you to now to not show up for the 11th day, for example, and that's how it keeps you motivated. And that's it, really. That's the tiny little actions recipe baked into a nice little habit loop, which incidentally is the official name of what we've just created together. I'm running out of time, so all I want to do is remind you, please do not let this be a waste of your time. Please write down that action on your sheet of paper, commit 5 to 10 minutes this weekend, go over the process, and then spend maybe the next 7 days trying it out. You have my email address on the thing. Email me if you get stuck. There's no strings attached. I just want to help you, because you don't have to wait for your entire life slate to be clean before you can create something good for yourself and to start being healthier, or whatever it is that you've promised yourself for the last 6 to 12 months with that action. You can start by one tiny incremental change at a time, and you can start it tomorrow. And soon you're going to see all the results you're getting, and you're going to want to do more, because that's how you're wired.
Hi, am I on? I don't have my thing for the... to change the... there we go. Do I get some reprieve in terms of the time? La verdad que estoy bastante nervioso. If somebody had asked me that in 15 years ago, that I was going to be giving a talk on autism and dementia, I would have thought that they were completely balmy. And I say it from this perspective. I come from a very large family. I'm told there's a reflection there which affects some people. But anyway, I'm told that I come from a very large family. It's absolutely massive. My parents have 14 grandchildren. There are great-grandchildren on my wife's side in Spain, similar things. And not one of them suffers from autism. And other than my grandmother at the tail end of her life, when she died at the age of 92, she had a bit of dementia, but nobody else has had dementia. Those conditions, unfortunately, befell my eldest son, John, and my father, James, who I'll be speaking to you about today. Autism afflicts my very lovely boy, John, who you see in the picture there some years ago now. And as I'm sure many of you will remember who have been blessed with having children, the first time I laid my hands on this human being in hospital, I thought, this is the human being who has made me a dad. Never in my wildest dreams would I thought that he would never call me dad, at least not in the way that you would have expected, and at the time that you would have expected that he would have done so. And why us? Why me are the questions which my wife and I often ask ourselves. Some people say, and I'm a believer, that God sends these special children to strong parents. I'm afraid I don't quite buy that. My wife showed me an article in preparation for this talk, and I'm going to quote it to you briefly, and it says, "Let me tell you about special needs parents. God didn't choose us because he knew we were strong enough. God didn't skim over the pool of parents waiting for a child and handpick the ones who stood out the most to raise these babies, who would need extra care." And the article goes on, "Do I believe my son is God sent? Of course. I just know there was nothing special about me that made me the best candidate to be his mother." You see, my son is what is termed in the jargon, as non-verbal autistic. He is well and truly ensconced in the autistic spectrum disorder, so it's ASD for short. And in fact, even saying these words here and now seems surreal to me, 13 years on. One of the aspects of John is that he cannot talk. I'll qualify that slightly. If not, my younger son, Marco, who's 9, he will slap me across the face. Because he says, "No, John, Dad, it's not." People say that John cannot talk. It's just, that's not right, he says. He just talks differently. And before I move on to the language skills which are available to him, I want to say this in relation to John's siblings. What we've realized is that they have become very conscious and protective of his older brother. Although they're both younger than he, they treat him as if it was the other way around. It's quite funny and enriching, I think, to watch. Marco particularly, he's so high. John is now higher than me, and he's a very big boy, and it's quite odd when you see Marco controlling John and admonishing him for things that he may or may not be doing. And I think that has made both his siblings very special persons and stronger people. They are very much aware of the weaknesses of others, and especially if we're dealing with people with special needs. The flip side of this is that they obviously carry a burden, a psychological burden in many respects. They have a big brother who they cannot share things with. If in the future, when they go to a discotheque, they won't be able to say what happened. They can't have normal conversations about what happened in school, share homework woes with him. None of that happens in my household. They can't share a joke. And one of the things which my wife and I wonder many times is whenever there's been a massive meltdown at home, and thankfully it's happening less and less often in the morning, my children, they put their uniform on and off they go and they face the day. But they carry that inside. And whilst I think they're strong individuals, I want to make a clarion call almost, on behalf of all families who have special educational needs children in their midst. That spare a thought for them. Spare a thought for the suffering and the issues that they have to deal with on a daily life, because their existence, I can tell you, is not normal, and I can say that as a parent. And I wish to quote this briefly again from the same article that Rosa showed me, which talks about this issue, and it says, "So often we as special needs parents are told that we were chosen because we were somehow stronger than other parents. But this is what I'm here to tell you. We weren't always this way. We weren't special needs parents because we are strong. We are strong because we are special needs parents." Now, let me introduce you to some, as I call it, John speak. And you need to understand that these words came late in life. When he didn't talk as you'd expect most human beings to talk within the first 2, 3, 4 years, we've had to extract these words as a result of the sheer hard work, particularly of that supermother that is my wife, and the educational system here. So, for example, dink is drink. Now, it's not any drink. Depending on the circumstances and the location, it can be a Coke, it can be an Aquarius, it can be of the lemon flavor, it can be of the orange flavor, it can be a lemonade, all of those things, right? Now, the other example is we've realized recently on Sundays, when we'll get out of bed, sure, I should be moving the pictures actually, when we get out of bed, he'll approach me in particular, because I'm normally the first one out, and he'll say, "Tmes." Now, this requires some explanation. Tmes is Thomas, who is his first cousin, 2 years his senior. He absolutely adores and loves Thomas. Thomas, he normally sees at my mother's house, su mama. And because recently we've been taking out my mother more often than not on Sundays, he's in a sort of his own logical way saying, "I want to go out today with mama. Today is Sunday," and he's aware it's a Sunday. And the point I'm making about all of this is that you need to have the inside track. So that's John and Lucia, many years ago now. Inside track. And that he can't communicate. I'm really running out of time. He can't communicate with you, and you wouldn't understand what he's saying. And then this gives rise to another issue, that we don't know, for example, and it's a concern that Rosa and I normally talk about, what happens if he's been bullied at school? I mean, if he suffers physical pain, he'll say pupa. You may not know where he's suffering the pupa, where it's emanating from, but what about the psychological pain that he may suffer now or in the future? If he's been bullied at school, if he's been hit, you will not necessarily know. So that's a bugbear that we suffer and we have to deal with somehow. But generally, he's well behaved, and he is, as I say, he's well behaved. But even when he's happy, in other words, when he's not in meltdown territory, he will behave rather bizarrely to you. This can have an effect, particularly I find, certainly not in Gibraltar or even in Spain, but in other places we've been to, and with teenagers, they will laugh at him. And it's something which you could say you learn to live with or you deal with, but the reality is you don't. On many occasions, I'm not a violent person by nature, but my instinct wants me to go up to them and whack them across the face, if I could. That's Margot there. and Lucia. The other thing which does surface once in a while is emotion. And thankfully it hasn't surfaced in this talk, but no guarantees that it won't. Because, you know, when he does suffer a meltdown, on many occasions you do feel like melting down yourself. I'll need to move on. I've got 5 minutes left, and I need to speak about my father. One of the things that bothers me now more and more is the fact that I can't have a normal conversation with my son. And that's the same with Dad, unfortunately. And, you know, in relation to Dad, sorry, I'm just going to do that. And I'd say he's actually a very sociable child because, as I said, we are a big family. So that's only some of his cousins. And it's inevitable that he would be sociable, you know. Sorry, that's Dad as a boxer. I would never, ever, ever, ever have imagined that I would see my dad the way he is now. He is a shadow of his former self. This man was a strong man, both physically as a boxer. He's the one on the right. Always in command, a leader almost by nature, and he's now, you know, he's not like that. Siempre ha sido muy presumido, as you can see in these photographs, and like autism, you know, it's robbed you of those conversations. However, unlike autism, with Dad, you find that his eyes are now lifeless, and there are moments when he does connect, and you really need to grab those moments. I can give you one or two anecdotes, depending on the time available. I mean, the other day, literally last week, I was with my daughter, and I pointed the iPhone camera at him, and I said, "Venga, Dad, una foto." And he actually sort of did a smile, as in sort of a 1950s pin-up boy type of thing, Dean Martin, you know, and I could not believe it, you know. And you see it in the eyes. That is what fascinates me. It's all in the eyes. I don't, you know, that dullness, that death that's there. But sometimes it does shine through. So, and there you have it. That's him there about 4 or 5 years ago, muy enterado with his etiquette and his good manners, and that also shines through. One thing that I'm really grateful to God for is that I do remember the last conversation I had with him, the last coffee. It's quite odd, actually, the last lunch. The last conversation, I can tell you, was on Friday the 13th, unlucky for some, of April 2018. He was lying in the hospital bed at St. Bernard's Hospital for a routine procedure, and we talked about my possible return to politics. I won't tell you what he said. And it's that was the last proper conversation I had with him. And he contracted urine tract infection, and then that was it. From there, within a week, he was in Hillsides, and he's been at Hillsides since, and getting from bad to worse. But again, as I say, his character does shine through on occasions. He will harangue. Maybe less so now, but there was a point in time 4 or 5 months ago when he would harass and harangue the carers, telling them that he had to go to a meeting to his beloved Rock Hotel, of which he was manager for 22 years and worked there for 40 years, or with a clenched fist he would want to go for one of the carers. So that's Dad through and through. I'm going to try and get through this, and I've got 2 minutes left. I'm sorry if I've spoken too fast, do forgive me, but I was very conscious of the time, and for these things I'm a bit of a stickler. I've realized now I've got more time than I thought, and so I'm going to quote you this, and this is a poem, or maybe I shouldn't. Yes? The emotion is there. So if I break down, it's fine? Yes. Okay. Hopefully, with the help of the one above, I'll get through it. Okay, I think this is the last one. So, this was inspired, shall I say, not penned, by my sister Noelle, and, okay. Well, you can read it. What I would say about emotion, and it didn't happen when I was talking about John, and that's probably because I've lived with this for the last 13 years. With Dad, it's different. So, but I'll get through it. So majestic, because you probably can't read it, can you? Anyway, I've changed the words slightly because I thought one of them was a bit unfair. So majestic he sits on his throne, paying his bills in his lair, which we call home, firm but yet so kind, sparring with my nephew, that's Marco, by the way. Where is his mind? Why, how, when, what? His mind is lost, I feel distraught. His old present, but not in his mind. Hey. Oh, yeah. Sorry. A vessel so mighty, but what's inside? The king of the jungle who once heard his roar, and now he smiles sweetly, staring at the door. Two more sentences. Where is my hero, my lion, my king? Alzheimer's has robbed him of his boxing ring. Sorry. I think I'm done. As Julian said, it's I can tell you, thank you. It's so much easier talking about the economy and the debt and foreign affairs. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. I bet you all thinking at the beginning, oh my God, here he comes again with his gay rights, his utopian politics, his anxiety attacks on speak freely. Well, perish the thought. Today I have decided to talk about her, my mum. Let's do things properly and let's present her to you. Her name is Maria de los Dolores Violeta Wood, de Soltera Camilleri, 93 years of age, a born and bred Gibraltarian, evacuee, and still going strong. And I'm Edward Joseph Wood, mid-50s, commonly known as Eddie, her only son, and heir to the throne, and first in the line of succession. The fact that I have been forever an only son has never been much of an issue. In fact, it was something that didn't bother me in the very least. Leading a carefree life, much to the annoyment and envy of others. But suddenly, out of the blue, in a dull March day of 2003, my mum started having heart problems that led to a severe heart attack. All of a sudden, I found myself on a plane with her on our way to St. Mary's Hospital in London, and I clearly recall thinking to myself in that bloody plane, tearfully as Gibraltar disappeared into the distance, how the hell I was going to confront all of this alone. And I did. We stayed there for 2.5 months in a horrible, seedy hotel in Paddington, and in that time, a very unknown and obscure part of me emerged, that to date, I have developed into a fine art. I learned not to be scared or intimidated by anything or anyone, to stand up on my own 2 feet. Didn't have much of a choice anyway. And to simply focus on that person that slowly but surely was becoming more and more dependent on you. That London experience was an eye-opener, making me realize that if you want something done, it wasn't going to come in a silver platter, making you stand on your own 2 feet and fighting for it the hard way. As time has gone by, I have been left with 2 options regarding my mum. 1, put her into full-time care and let the others do the job for you. Or 2, get a grip and get on with it. I have chosen the latter, and although I am a born complainer, rather well known for making mountains out of molehills, and a full-blown drama queen, regrets none. Every minute that I spend with Mum is all about making up for lost time in the past. Our house is run like clockwork, the envy of Buckingham Palace. More often than not, the inevitable clash of the titans erupts. We are a rather feisty couple, you know. And boy, does this give us an adrenaline fix like no other. But all ends well. Big hug and a kiss, and see you next time around. It's amazing how many things I have discovered that I'm capable of doing that never even crossed my mind that now I do out of sheer necessity. Please note that we are dealing here with a 93-year-old lady, bright as a spark, who doesn't do things by halves, vain in the nicest possible way, with an antes muerta que sencilla attitude that is totally beyond her control. I have learned how to cook far and beyond the humble fried egg that I used to break anyway, and helping out with the cleaning has become an absolute dream. I swan through the house with broom and mop, comparable only to a queen with scepter and orb in hand, with absolute composure, resigned to do a job that simply needs to be done. I'm an expert hair plucker. And even the toughest hairs cannot possibly resist my techniques with the tweezers. I have also taken with gusto doing makeup on my mum. Watching YouTube videos on the subject come in very handy, especially sorting out the dilemma between choosing between cherries of the Pacific and mother-of-pearl delights nail varnish, or deep plum or dusty cottage rose lipsticks. However, perhaps the biggest challenge that comes around occasionally is when I receive an invitation and I'm charged with the unenviable task of looking for clothes for her. The priceless looks of sales assistants in utter confusion is something beyond description. When I start asking for size 18s and 40 double D cup bras, and the sighs of relief when I provide some background info. Life is a vicious circle. Our parents take care of us up to a certain time in our lives, and then after a certain time in our lives, we supposedly take care of them. And in my case, I can assure you that this is perhaps the biggest honor bestowed on me by myself alone. I use the word supposedly because many opt for the easier option, which is just as respectable, by the way, for others to take care of our parents. But at the end of the day, it is simply a matter of choice. Balancing work and mum can be a rather stressful affair. Every time the phone rings, I get this cold shiver down my spine. And when I phone home and she does not answer, oh my God, I just drop everything, get on my bike, rush down, only to find her radiantly sitting down, asking what the fuss is all about. Well, that's a drama queen in me making an appearance. The hospital has become another regular. And I think we can all agree what a challenge our dear hospital can sometimes be. Endless appointments and prescriptions, the odd stay, dealing with some people who literally thrive in making our lives an absolute misery. My name is probably known for all the wrong reasons. However, on the positive side, my attempts as an amateur dispensing pharmacist are really gaining ground, you know. There is only one word that sums up this rather nicely, and that word is love. Most days when I wake up, I am enveloped in this feeling of, here we go again. But somehow, with the help of that only word, I get through the days without the slightest thought of how I'm going to make it to the next. I live with this feeling of when I'm going to be liberated, and in fear of the day when it finally comes. But my life is voluntarily on hold, and heavily involved in making my mum happy. However, when that freedom ever catches up on me, if it ever does, it will probably be too late to get my life back on track. But all is forgiven. I live on a day-to-day basis. And whatever the future holds for me, in all honesty, I don't give a damn. My priority is her quality of life. I just pray that whatever happens, it is my mum that passes away first. To the contrary, in less than 24 hours, she would be banished into exile. She would be, whilst I'm around, no fear, Eddie is here. And I am now the one that keeps this complex puzzle of life at home together. And I ain't doing too bad either. Who would have said, eh? There is one quote from the Bible, it had to come around, that I totally identify with when it comes to my mum. It comes from St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verses 4 to 7, and it goes like this. Wait for it. Love is always patient and kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. Well, not in our case. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always hopes, always preserves. This is normally thrown at us by the priest at church weddings, and that we all tend to conveniently forget before we even get to the reception. But it would be extremely useful to perhaps put this into practice with elderly parents, if you have failed to do it with your partner. It isn't difficult, you know, and if I'm doing it, anyone else can for sure. Anyway, let me show you now another photo taken last summer. Oh, there it is. That's me and Mum dancing a paso doble. How true it is that a picture speaks 1,000 words. This is a true reflection of what it's all about in our case. Since I'm at it, wait for it, I may as well grab the opportunity and send a message to our government. I'm grateful for the assistance that I receive, but please do try to cut down on all this bureaucracy that goes with any request for extra home help. Sometimes I get this awful feeling that the whole intention is to bore me out of existence, but it ain't working. A 93-year-old is a 93-year-old, especially when they're still living at home. Not much room to maneuver. You see what I mean? Every bit of assistance is a blessing. But please do try to minimize on third-degree interviews and endless waiting times thereafter. This assistance is also about those in my situation, who stand alone, who are in desperate need of support, who are doing a very difficult job balancing work and play, with all kinds of crap thrown at us, most of which are not even self-inflicted, but rather caused by the overzealous attitudes of others. I'll finish now on light-hearted notes that made me smile. The other day, I was having a groan and moan day at home, and Mummy was sitting on her throne watching Salvame. And I said to her, "Hey, Mum, you listening to me?" She gave me a very sly look, and she said, "No." That's the story of my life. Thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for still hanging on and being here. And thank you to Julian for giving me this opportunity. The night that Julian asked me if I wanted to take part in GibTalks, I was actually I was on a plane in Malaga on my way to Barcelona. And I was literally on the runway, and I remember receiving the message and telling Julian, yes, I'm really interested, but look, if I don't answer, it's because my plane is leaving. And that's how it went. My plane left, I landed in Barcelona, and Julian had replied that, it was confirmed I was taking part in GibTalks. And that same day, I had actually landed in Gibraltar from India, because as some of you may know, I went to India to represent Gibraltar in the Commonwealth Youth Parliament. And at the time, I thought, I'll talk about this. But for me, I had this feeling, like this momentous thing. The reason why I was going back to Barcelona was because, I'm going to choke off. I was packing up my life there. I had spent over 2 years, and for me, I thought this would be a great opportunity to explain the lessons that I've learned whilst being out there. So just to explain a little bit about myself, I'm 25 years old. I spent almost 7 years out of Gibraltar, and the largest part of that I was studying, but I also worked as a journalist this summer in Barcelona. And to set the context of why I decided to move there, I was in my last year at Kingston University, and Brexit had just happened, the referendum, and I remember getting there and I told my tutor, look, I want to do my dissertation on Brexit and the future of Gibraltar, and he tells me, look, this is really recent, all the deadlines are changing, we don't know what's going to happen, it's really hard to do something like this. I told him, look, I look at the history and I'll be able to do it, trust me, I'll do it. And this tutor, who I'm still in contact with today, actually becomes then an expert on Gibraltar, because obviously he has to read up to be able to mark my work at the end of it. And that's when I kind of get the first taste of, wait, we have a voice and we can explain the story of Gibraltar. No? So I finished my degree and I realized that I want to do a master's, but I'm done with being in London. It's too cold, it gets dark too quickly. And at that time, my partner, who's Catalan, is living in Barcelona. We met in London, but he's back there. So I thought this is a good opportunity to move to Barcelona and try it out there, no? So this is what I do. I move there, and I've literally just about unpacked. And a colleague from GBC gets in contact with me, this is September 2017. So my colleague from GBC calls me, say, look, GBC is in Barcelona. We want to cover the lead up to the referendum. This is end of September. Do you want to do an interview? It's like, yeah, for sure. And I call my mom, I'm doing an interview for GBC. And niña, arréglate, eh? Like, so I get in, I meet. I meet the reporter in Barcelona in a really nice plaza in the Gothic Quarter, very near the port, and he's asking me a series of questions. And one of the last questions is, today is Wednesday, on Sunday the referendum is being celebrated. Do you think it's going to get violent? And I went in there really naive, obviously, and that's still recorded. I was going to show you, but I thought, no, I'll better just tell you. But it's on record, me saying to GBC, no, there's tensions, but it's not going to get violent. People are simply going out to vote, to exercise a democratic vote. They're right, no? So this is Wednesday. On Friday, I have the first day in my new university. And I'm studying a master's in political science, and hindsight is a beautiful thing, no? And I get there the first day, and this teacher, what I mistook for crazy eyes was actually a little bit of fear in her eyes. And she looked at us, because my class, we were 32 students from 27 different nationalities, right? And she looked at us and she was like, look, next week, I don't know what's going to happen. Access to campus may be, it might be hard to get here. And everyone's looking at her like, what? Like, it'll be fine. So this is Friday. Sunday comes around, the 1st of October, and I don't think I have to explain to anyone what happened that day. The images were clear on the TV. And we wake up, my partner and friends of mine were going to go out and vote. And people who genuinely were not going to go out and vote switched on the TV that morning, saw what was happening, got dressed and went to vote, because this is the reaction from something that had been building up slowly. All of a sudden, it almost like explodes in the face. And I've been there for about 2 weeks. It's like, what on earth is happening? I'm getting calls from my family, from my friends. Don't go out, stay home. It's like, okay, chill. Like, I'm here, I can see it with my own eyes. It's not the end of the world. But what begins to happen is that you begin to see how people start to mobilize, no? And everything was shut down. There was general strikes, and from the point of view of a political analyst, like, it's incredible. And I was there and seeing, like, I'm watching history being made. When I first moved to Catalunya, I didn't speak any Catalan. I could understand some words. But believe you me, within the first month of being there, it was so tense and there was so much news going on that by the end of October, I could understand Catalunya, like, perfectly. So it's the 27th of October, we're having lunch at home, me and my partner are watching the news, and the president is going to address the nation. What does he have to say? And all of a sudden, we're having lunch, and he declares a republic for 8 seconds. So me and my partner were living in the Republic of Catalunya without really knowing what's happening next. And then he retracts his statement. So, okay, now what is really going on? No? We're like, ya, aquí no cuadra something. So anyway, I start going to demonstrations because I want to see how people are being mobilized, and Catalunya is truly transforming. These people are mobilization experts, and I want to mention that they do it in such a peaceful way. Catalunya turns yellow. No, yellow is the color that they use to side with what was happening. And that's amazing to see on one side, but on the other side, you can't ignore that there's this division that is starting to grow. And it's sad, no? So you get to the end of 2017, and in this short space of 2 months, Catalunya is fractured. There's imposed Spanish rule. They no longer have the autonomy to as a region. No? And Spain, you're left with Mariano's Rajoy, Pepe ya on its last legs. So, there's this fascination as well that comes on how is this being covered by the media. The EU doesn't want to get involved. There's politicians in prison. People are genuinely really upset. And without getting too political, but to highlight the main point of what I'm going to get to, is that you have to stand up at least for the democratic values and accept that on the side of the Catalan independence, not all, but there was a part who had been pushing for dialogue this whole time. And they're really starting to be pushed up against the wall. So it's around May 2018 that I decide again, I'm not done with understanding how the world works, how politics works, how communication works. And my struggle is that I don't understand why political scientists keep searching for the why, but not necessarily on how we can make these changes. So I sit down with my parents. At this point, I know I'm not going to get another grant. And I come from a humble background. I'm the first to graduate from my nucleus of family. I have very clever cousins who all graduated as well. But in my nucleus, my brother has learning difficulties. So for my parents at this point, they're putting all the eggs in this basket for me to do well. No? So I go on the hunt, and I'll be back with a really good idea. Dad, I promise. This is like, I have to do this. So I go on the hunt, I call my parents back. I found a course, international political journalism, everything encompassed in one. Ooh, It had taken me 5 years to get there, but I had felt like I'd built all this background to finally get there and said, this is it. So my dad, my mom, okay, look, it's in Barcelona, I don't have to move again. There's just one thing, it's what? It's in Spanish. So my dad is my number one fan, but look, it's in Spanish, but okay, you can speak Spanish, I know, but another thing is to go and study in Spanish. So it's okay. I say, Dad, I can do it. And I start over the summer. No, I'm reading all my books in Spanish. And around September, I start to get the emails. You have to enroll soon. And all these emails are coming in, really HR, like admin focus. And thank God for my partner. I tell him, can you help me understand what the email's asking for? Because I don't know how I'm going to do this. So anyway, one day before uni, there's a demonstration to commemorate the 1 year since the referendum. And this is not the demonstrations that we saw a few months ago. This is a year before. No? So around October 2018, I head down to a demonstration, and everything is as normal as it had been. No? Until the moment that the politicians come out on stage to speak. And at this point, it's the first demonstration that I've been to where there's actually calls for resignation for the president, for the interior minister of Catalunya. And it's also the first time that when demonstration is called off, people actually linger. Because like I said, they had a very good way of mobilizing that when it was done, everyone would go home. But this specific date, people started to linger. It got dark, the sun went down, the tension was building, and there was some point where I realized, okay, even though I can identify a lot with what's happening here and understand the struggle, it's not the same thing. It's not my battle. And not that I'd been fighting it as my battle, but you almost have to take a step back and start to see things for what they really are, no? So anyway, I'm going to grab some water. So I arrived to the first day of uni. And I had felt comfortable because the the head of the guy leading the masters was English. So I had emailed him and told him, look, I don't think I'm going to be able to write everything in Spanish. Is it okay to do some stuff in English? And he was like, yeah, that's fine. But it's fine until you get there and really you realize that, no, you signed up for a course in Spanish. Everyone's talking in Spanish and all the work is being done in Spanish. So, so I get there and there's 13 classmates. One Chinese guy, one Venezuelan girl, and the rest all from Spain. From Malaga to Valencia, Girona, Euskadi, Galicia, Zaragoza, Valladolid, and then there's me. And with this Gibraltarian mindset of, we enjoy the same food and the same music and aspects of our culture and we share a family, but at the same time, we're not the same. And that's right, it's 100%, that's right, we're not the same. But there's also a part that we have to accept. In all my years of being away, I've never been so comfortable. First of all, I didn't have to explain to anyone what a Gibraltar was, because everyone knew, we're all from the same peninsula. Either they had been here, everyone had an anecdote, or like my friend Paula, who still remembers when she came down to Gib at 6 years old and couldn't cross the border because her mum didn't pack a passport. So, she's still not over it. And in my class, we were 10 girls and three guys, all very open-minded to debate, and there was definitely more that united us than divided us. We attended the Women's March together, which saw over 1 million people in the streets of Barcelona. And basically, within a month of starting, I'd very much become the class trumpet on anything and everything related to Britain, Brexit, and most importantly, Gibraltar. And, this had been my biggest fear, starting and thinking that I wasn't going to be able to explain myself properly. But that didn't matter because my classmates didn't care. In fact, they helped me improve. And within a couple of months, my Spanish had gotten, miles better. And then I found that in every uni that I've been to, I've always been told, you sound like a government representative, because I always speak about Gibraltar and Brexit, you know, and I tell them, well, look, it's not my fault. It's that here, at least, we have a unified idea of what our international relations should look like, no? So here I'm faced with the opportunity to explain the issues of Gibraltar to a group of people that I thought genuinely were not going to be interested. And it's not until just before Christmas that a teacher who comes in to teach us, and he begins to use Gibraltar as an example to explain the conflict between China and Taiwan. And in the class, one Gibraltarian and one Chinese guy, and we all start smirking between each other, and one of my classmates shouted out, "Hey, I'd be careful if I was you," and the teacher, very apologetic, "No, I wasn't going to say anything offensive," and it's true. Because he wasn't. But he was going to explain the situation in a very cold manner, in the same way that when us people interested in politics, or anyone for that matter, sits down. For example, I remember when Juan Guaidó self-proclaimed himself president last year in Venezuela. We all got there that day as if we knew what was happening, and my Venezuelan friend was like, actually, that's not like that, no? So what I found was that through dialogue, months of going back and forth, the opportunity to explain the situation, we're able to basically, see, I'm looking at the time and seeing that I'm really running out. So basically, for this time, I realized that through dialogue, we're really able to spread this message. No, and I'm asked to do a documentary, and I decide to do it on the 50 years since the border has closed. I come back, I interview the chief minister, I use footage from the archives. And what this leads to is that by the end of it, they asked me if, please, can they use this documentary to show future classes, not just my course, but other courses related to politics, related to journalism. And for me, I was just happy enough that I was a Gibraltarian telling Gibraltar's story to a crowd that was mostly Spanish, and if that's all I've managed to achieve, I'm happy. But I'm not naive either, okay? And I don't want you to think that. In January, we traveled to Madrid. I'm really going to go over. In January, we traveled to Madrid with my course, and I traveled to the Spanish Foreign Ministry, El Cano Real Institute, which is basically a think tank, and both places mentioned Gib without me even saying that I'm from Gibraltar. And I'm really feeling overwhelmed because this feeling of not being able to argue back, because we're there on an institutional visit, and it's not a forum for debate. And it's not until we get to the Agencia F, which is this massive building, the center of where all the news is being focused and coming out of Spain, and there's a huge story on display about Gibraltar. And at this point is when my teacher turns to me and says, he's like, al final resulta verdad, Gibraltar es el ombligo del mundo. And basically, so in the end, you're right, Gibraltar is the belly button of the world. And I said, look, Albert, I know we're here in Madrid, and Gib should not have to factor into this, but we're everywhere. It's relevant everywhere. So the point is, Gib is relevant, and how do we navigate this in a positive way, no? A week after Madrid, I meet this politician. He had been in PSOE, then Ciudadanos. Now he's retired. He's also a lawyer and a journalist, one of many talents. And, I'm there as a guest at the press conference. I can't ask questions because I'm a student. And at the end, he's looking at me like, well, who are you? So I stand up, I say, look, I'm Adriana. And somebody from the EU who had arranged it, I said, no, she's British. And he came up to me, he was so upset that Britain was leaving the EU until he realized that I was Gibraltarian and said, oh, well, you still have a way of saying in the EU, no? And again, in that moment, I'm just standing there like, So at this point, I really started to think to myself, how do we navigate this dialogue? There's two things, two problems, and there's two Spains. One is the institutions which have the perfected response, and the other is the people that are willing to listen. You have to come to terms with, you're not going to change everyone's mind. But how can I best prepare myself? I want to be a journalist, but I also have this responsibility as being Gibraltarian. And a week before we go to Brussels, the EU, NATO, the Spanish embassy in Brussels, I see this politician again. It was total coincidence, and I see him again. And anyway, and I'm not going to pretend that I turned into this superhero and answered with this perfect response. But after Gibraltar did come up again, I said to him, look, have you traveled to the area recently? On what authority do you speak? Because it's so easy to fall into this rhetoric, especially now after Brexit. But the solution to our issue is a political one, reached through dialogue. That's at least in my opinion. And that's not to say we don't stand up and defend what we believe in, but the solution is sought through dialogue. And the relevance of Catalunya but that the solution is the same. I know you're all thinking, but it's them that don't want a dialogue, and yes, but what about the percentage of people that are willing to listen? I know they're out there. You know, yesterday I spoke to press outside number 6, and I went back later on in the evening and looked at the reports. Not all of them are negative. There is a genuine interest in what's going to happen in Gibraltar and El Campo de Gibraltar after Brexit. And I learned this year that the world of political communication is very closely linked. One of my teachers is waiting for his trial to begin for his role in and involvement in the Catalan process. And another teacher of mine became the de facto president of Òmnium Cultural when its president was put in prison. So it's not all evil people pulling the strings, no? There are genuine journalists who would like to work on the true story. And we don't achieve that by creating barriers or pretend that, you know, also here we don't have an interest in what happens over there. And I swear, I'm nearly done, Julian. And I suppose that the point is that going forward, we must continue to build bridges of dialogue. And not just in Spain, but beyond. As the Brexit generation, I think that's what we'll be known as, we owe it to our past generations who have suffered and worked so hard to guarantee the freedoms that we enjoy here in Gibraltar, that we continue to do the same and pave the way for Gibraltar in this world in a diplomatic manner and through education. Because the why of our issues has already been solved. It's how we are going to navigate this journey that now needs to be answered. In my opinion, thank you very much for still being here, and see you soon. Thank you.